Welcome, dear listener, to this comforting trip through history. If you're just settling in for the night, get comfortable and let the cares of the day fade away. Tonight, we'll be taking a little trip back in time to explore what life was like in a medieval tavern. Wherever in the world you may be tuning in from, and whatever time of day or night it is in your corner of the globe, I'm glad you're here. Feel free to share in the comments where you're listening from. It's always a delight to see the far-reaching community we have here. And if you enjoy these quiet musings on history, do stick around and subscribe for more journeys into the past. But for now, let's set our scene. Imagine, if you will, that you're a weary traveler making your way down a dusty road as the sun begins to set over a humble medieval village. The air is crisp and cool, filled with the earthy scents of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls softly, echoing down the quiet lanes. You feel the weariness of the day in your legs, the long hours of walking behind you, and the promise of rest calling ahead. As you round a bend, you catch sight of a welcoming glow in the distance, the warm flickering light of a tavern window. Drawing closer, you begin to hear the muffled sounds of laughter and chatter floating out into the evening air, mingling with the clinking of tankards and the crackle of a hearth fire. Your pace quickens, heart lifting with the promise of warmth, food, and perhaps a bit of cheer. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, you're greeted by a rush of heat and the lively hum of conversation. The tavern is a cozy space, low-beamed ceilings stretching overhead, their timbers dark and aged by smoke and time. Sturdy trestle tables are worn smooth by countless elbows and tankards. The walls are hung with simple, rustic decor, a stag's head here, a faded tapestry there. Candles flicker gently in wrought iron sconces, casting a golden glow over the scene. The scent of roasting meat and fresh bread fills the air. The atmosphere is warm, inviting a little heaven from the world outside. At the center of it all stands William, the tavern keeper. He's a stout, jovial man in his middle years, with ruddy cheeks and a neatly trimmed beard streaked with silver. His eyes twinkle with the quiet wisdom of someone who's seen a great deal and yet still finds joy in the day-to-day bustle of life. As he moves among the tables, greeting patrons, collecting empty tankards, and laughing at familiar jokes, you can sense the warm authority he carries. This is his realm. William's family has run this tavern for generations, passed down from father to son for as long as anyone in the village can remember. He grew up scampering between the barrels, learning the secrets of pouring a perfect pint at his father's knee and sneaking pieces of pie from the kitchen when his mother wasn't looking. Now, he takes great pride in maintaining the old traditions while adding his own quiet touch to the place. As you settle onto a bench and catch William's eye, he nods in welcome and sends a serving girl over with a hearty meat pie and a foaming tankard of ale. "Good evening, traveler," he says warmly, wiping his hands on his apron. You've come to the right place to chase away the chill. We'll get some hot food in, yeah. You thank him, and he claps you on the shoulder before moving on to tend to a group of regulars in the corner. An old mason, a couple of shepherd boys, and a widow who sells candles at the market. They raise their mugs in greeting. This tavern, like many across medieval Europe, is more than just a place to eat and drink. It's the heart of the village, a place where stories are shared, disputes are settled, and news travels faster than any messenger on horseback. By the fire, an elderly minstrel strums a lute, singing an old ballad about a knight and a lady fair. His voice is soft and rich, the melody winding its way through the warm air. At another table, a group of merchants is haggling over trade routes and tariffs, their hands animated as they point at maps and parchments. A young couple shyly holds hands beneath the table, cheeks flushed, while in the shadows near the back, a pair of cloaked strangers nurse their drinks in silence, eyes flickering with secrets untold. It is a world in miniature, alive with the quiet drama of ordinary lives. Taverns like this one were essential threads in the fabric of medieval society. In an age before widespread literacy or mass communication, they served as places where news from afar could be heard, whether brought by traveling merchants, pilgrims, or soldiers returning from campaign. People came not just for food and drink, but for connection, for the warmth of human company, for stories, songs, and sometimes even a bit of gossip. Of course, taverns weren't just places for socializing. They played an important economic role as well. Travelers needed rest and food. Traders needed a space to do business. Local farmers, after a long day in the fields, needed a place to spend a few coins and enjoy a hot meal. And the tavern keeper, like William, had to be more than a mere innkeeper. He was a businessman, a host, a mediator, and on some nights, even a peacekeeper. If a fight broke out, and now and then one did, it was William's firm voice and weathered hands that restored order. A well-swung cudgel kept behind the bar, and the unspoken respect of the regulars helped too. As the evening deepens, the fire burns brighter, and the air grows heady with laughter and warmth. You sip your ale, savoring the rich malty flavor, and let the soft rise and fall of voices wash over you. The pie before you is tender and savory, filled with lamb, onions, and rosemary. You glance around the room and realize that each person here carries their own story. The mason's hands are calloused and rough, but his eyes are kind. He once built the chapel at the far end of the village. The widow, now leaning over a steaming mug of cider, once danced barefoot in the spring festival before time slowed her step. Even the silent men at the back. What journeys brought them here, and what paths will they walk tomorrow? The tavern walls have heard more than they will ever tell. Tonight, I invite you not into the feasting halls of kings or the smoky decks of longships, but into the quieter corners of Viking life, into the shadows where the small feet pattered, where laughter and tears echoed softly, where children lived, and where, too often, they suffered. You've heard of the Viking warriors, their swords, their raids, their blood-soaked legends. But behind those towering figures stood children, fragile, shivering, hungry children. Children born into a world where every breath was earned, where life was never guaranteed, where death, ever close, rarely came as a surprise. Let me take you to one such village, nestled among frozen pines and smoky hills. A small place with timber walls and thatched rooftops, where the wind whistled like wolves and the soil grew nothing without a fight. Here, inside a longhouse lined with furs and soot dark beams, a child wakes. His name doesn't matter. There were many like him. Let's just call him what he was, a Viking child. He's perhaps 6 winters old, thin-limbed, his tunic too short, patched over and over by a wary mother who hasn't smiled in weeks. The hearth has gone cold in the night. His fingers are stiff with frost. His little sister lies beside him, wrapped in wool, cuffing softly. Their breath fogs in the air. There is no firewood, so he rises without complaint and steps into the snow barefoot. The pain in his feet is sharp at first, but then it dulls. He's used to it. His task is simply bring in wood, feed the goats, sweep the ash, and if there's time, collect eggs. If the hens haven't frozen again. In Viking lands, the work of a child was never just play. No one asked if you were tired. No one checked if your hands bled from the splinters. You did what had to be done, because your family needed you, and because the gods watched always. Odin sees, Thor punishes the lazy, Loki tricks the careless. You learned fast. His mother is already grinding barley by the dim light that slips through the smoke hole. Her eyes are sunken, her hands cracked. She does not ask him how he slept. He does not ask what there will be for breakfast. He already knows. If the goat gave milk, then milk. If not, then nothing. And still, this boy is one of the lucky ones. He was not born sick. He was not discarded. You see, in Viking culture, not all babies were allowed to live. If a child was born too small, too weak, or if times were hard, the family might decide not to raise it. The infant would be taken outside the longhouse, left in the cold, offered up to the gods, or simply abandoned. There were no hospitals, no mercy. Survival was the only rule. Those who made it past infancy still had to fight to survive. Illness was everywhere. Water was drawn from rivers used by animals. Food spoiled fast. Parasites lived in the grain. Fevers burned through whole households, and there were no herbs strong enough, no healer wise enough to stop it. Children died often. A cough could mean death. A small cut could fester. A chill could take a child in their sleep. And so mothers held their babies tightly when they could, knowing it might be the last night. Fathers carved wooden charms to ward off spirits, but the gods were as cruel as the winters. If you survived to 5, you worked. If you made it to 10, you trained. Boys began practicing with wooden swords. They learned to row, to fight, to hunt. They watched their fathers sharpen axes, and tell stories of raids and blood and glory. A boy did not dream of peace, he dreamed of battle, because only battle gave meaning. There were no schools, only stories. Around the hearth, old voices told of Odin hanging himself for knowledge, of Thor smashing giants, of brave warriors entering Valhalla, where the mead flowed and wounds never bled. These stories were not entertainment. They were instructions, lessons in courage, pain, loyalty, and death. But girls, their path was different, no softer. From the moment she could hold a needle, a Viking girl learned to spin, to weave, to dye, to sew. She cared for younger siblings, learned which berries could heal and which could kill, memorized the songs that eased childbirth and soothed the dying. She might marry at 12 or 13. A girl's value was tied to her usefulness, to the alliances she could forge, the children she could bear, the home she could hold together when the men were at sea. No one asked her if she was ready. Her husband might be kind, or not. He might be 20 winters older, or cruel, or drunk. Her life belonged to the family, then to the husband, then to the gods. Her voice, if raised, was rarely heard. Some girls, they say, became shield maidens, warrior women. But they were legends. Most Viking girls lived and died without ever lifting a sword. Even play for children was edged with hardship. They played with bones, stones, sticks. They carved dolls from driftwood, shaped animals from scraps of wool. But even their games trained them to fight, to endure, to survive. And when festivals came, Yule or the first thaw of spring, they were brief flickers of joy. A sweet cake, a new belt, a carved amulet. Songs were sung, fires lit, stories told. But the snow always returned, the hunger always followed, and the gods, who demanded offerings, never gave without taking. Discipline was harsh. Parents did not coddle. A child who disobeyed was beaten. A child who lied was punished before the gods could curse the house. Fear was a tool of survival. Respect was beaten in as much as it was taught. And still, amid this cold, this hunger, this pain, children laughed. Not always, not for long, but they laughed. They chased each other through fields of snow. They built games with what they had. They listened wide-eyed to stories of dragons and dwarves. They believed in magic, because sometimes magic was all that kept fear away. They loved fiercely. A sister who shared her cloak. A brother who taught them how to tie a fishing line. A grandmother who sang softly, even when her hands shook from the cold. But death was never far. When the sea rose up in storm, or raiders came in the night, or the harvest failed again, children disappeared. They were buried in shallow graves, marked with stones, or left to the wind. The cries of mourning were not loud. Grief was a private wound, wrapped tight so the world wouldn't smell weakness. Even gods could not promise safety. Thor could bring lightning, Odin could grant wisdom, but neither stopped fever, neither fed a starving child. So the children learned to pray, and then to stop praying. By 13, they were no longer children. A boy was expected to sail, to bleed, to fight. A girl was expected to marry, to bear, to serve. There was no pause, no moment to say goodbye to childhood. It ended while the snow still fell. And yet, there is something in their eyes, those children of the North. In sagas, they are rarely mentioned. But when they are brave, loyal, unflinching, because they had to be. They were born into ice and fire, into smoke and silence. Their childhoods were short, their dreams smaller than ours, but they carried the strength of mountains in their small hands. And though their lives were hard, miserable even, they left behind echoes, whispers in the wood grain of ancient ships, shadows in the corner of ruined hearths, fragments of toys buried in graves no one visits. They are not remembered with songs, but tonight we remember them with quiet. And in the soft hush of sleep, may their voices rise once more, not in pain, but in peace. Good night. Tonight, we drift back to the windswept coasts and foggy fields of early medieval Scandinavia, where the life of a Viking was rarely what the stories tell us. There were no blazing battles here, no treacherous, no longships cutting across the sea. Instead, our focus is on something more ordinary, more grounded, and more exhausting. Tonight we're walking in the mud-caked boots of a Viking farmer. You see, the truth about Viking life is that most Vikings weren't warriors. They weren't sailing off to raid monasteries. They weren't battling dragons or lifting axes toward the sky. Most were farmers, poor ones, and for them, life was less about glory and more about survival. Let's step outside the longhouse now. The cold air bites at your cheeks. The smell of damp earth, wood smoke, and animal dewing fills the air. The sun is barely over the horizon and already your day is full. Let's begin. The first thing you notice as a Viking farmer is the cold. Even in the summer, mornings are brisk, but come winter it's cruel. There is no central heating, no insulation, just a smoky hearth in the middle of a long, wooden hall. The smoke curls up into the thatched roof, darkening the beams with soot. Your lungs ache from breathing it in. Your eyes sting, and yet that fire is your lifeline. You share the longhouse with your family, your wife, your children, maybe your aging parents, and the animals. Yes, the goats, the cows, the pigs. They sleep inside with you. Their heat helps keep the place warm, and their smell becomes something you don't even notice after a while. Still, there's no rest. Dawn means chores. You wake to the grunt of pigs, the bleating of sheep. You throw off the heavy wool blanket stiff with dampness and rise. The first task, feeding the animals. You stumble out into the frosted yard. Your feet crunch over straw and mud. You grab a bucket of last season's hay thin and coarse and scatter it for the animals. The cow lowly moos. She's thin. Everyone is, really. Winter stores are running low. You pass by your fields. They're bare now, waiting. But when spring comes, your back will break to make them grow. Ag spring, the beginning of the farming season. It sounds lovely. Birds chirping, snow melting. But for you it means toil. You use a plow pulled by an ox, if you're lucky. If not, you pull it yourself. The earth is thick, clay heavy. You fight every inch to break it open. Your hands blister on the wooden handles. The sun rises higher. You sweat, not in summer heat but from sheer effort. All this just to prepare a small patch of soil. There's no fertilizer, no tractors, no machines, just your body and your will. And you have to time everything just right. A late frost could destroy your seeds. A dry summer could kill your crop. A cold, wet one, even worse, mold and rot. Farming here is gambling with starvation, but still you sow barley, rye, oats, maybe some flax if you're ambitious. The seed is precious. You measure each handful carefully. You can't afford waste. Every grain matters. If the crop fails, there is no backup. And when it grows, you pray for no hail, no pests, no neighbors who want to steal it. Your tools are simple: a wooden hoe, a sickle, maybe an iron knife if you're lucky, and you use them over and over, sharpening them with stones, replacing wooden handles when they snap. They are your lifeline, but they're expensive. Metal is hard to come by, and even if your crops survive, harvest isn't easy. Come late summer, you work from dawn till dusk, cutting, bundling, carrying. Your back aches, your knees throb, your fingers bleed. You sleep a few hours and rise to do it again. And after the harvest, the work is far from over. You must dry the grain, thresh it, winnow it, store it safely. Mice are always a threat, so is damp. A single ruined storage pot can mean a hungry winter. And what do you eat? Mostly porridge. Every day. Barley or oat porridge. Sometimes with a bit of dried fruit, or a few pieces of salted fish. If you're lucky, you might have a turnip, or a piece of goat cheese. Meat is rare. Cows are too valuable to slaughter. Sheep are for wool. Pigs are the main source of meat, but even thing only during winter feasts. You eat to survive, not to enjoy. And then there's the weather. Viking lands are not kind. The sea wind cuts through clothing. Storms come quickly. Rain can last for days. Snow comes early and stays late. And sometimes summer never really comes at all. You can't predict it. You can't control it. You just endure it. Your roof leaks. Your walls rot. You patch them with mud and straw. You hope they hold. But sometimes they don't. And illness, it's always around. A cough in spring can turn into death by autumn. There's no doctor, no medicine, just herbs, prayers, and hope. Your children often fall ill. Many don't make it past 5 years old. You bury them near the trees. You don't mark the graves. You just remember and think there are the taxes. Yes, even in the Viking age, someone wants a piece of what little you have. If you live under a local chieftain, he'll demand a share of your harvest, a portion of your meat, your cloth, your timber. In return, he might offer protection. Might. But when raiders come or rival clans attack, you're on your own. You grab your axe, meant for chopping wood, and hope it will do. You've trained for nothing. You own no armor, no shield, just your resolve. Most times you run. You hide in the forest with your family. If you're lucky, your home is still there when you return. If not, you rebuild. You always rebuild. And marriage, that's not a romantic story either. You likely marry young. Your wife comes with a dowry, perhaps some sheep or tools. She works beside you. In the field, in the home, she spins wool, bakes bread, raises children. It's a partnership of survival. Love, if it comes, is secondary. Together, you endure. She ages quickly, just like you, worn by childbirth, cold, and hunger. You both grow old by 40. Your children grow up helping you. Boys learn to till and sew. Girls learn to weave and cook. There's no school, no books, just lessons taught by handspun repetition. Sometimes, a few are lucky. A son may leave to join a raiding crew. Maybe he'll bring back silver. Maybe he'll die at sea. You hope for silver but prepare for silence. And sometimes, your daughter is married off to a neighboring farmer. You lose a pair of hands but gain an ally. The family is the backbone of everything. No help comes from outside. You live and die within your kin's reach. In winter everything slows, but nothing stops. You mend tools, weave cloth, spin yarn, sharpen blades, feed animals from your dwindling stores. The nights are long, the cold is cruel. You huddle close to the fire. Tell stories to your children. Recite the names of your ancestors. Pray for the sun to return. And yet there's beauty in it too. The snow-covered fields. The sound of wind across the frozen sea. The crackle of firelight. The quiet hum of life continuing even in hardship. It is not a life of glory but of endurance. And in that there is something noble. Sag the next time someone tells you about the bold Viking warriors with golden helmets and endless feasts. Remember this: most Vikings didn't raid, or conquer, or sail. They farmed, they struggled, they suffered, and they kept going through mud, snow, blisters, hunger, fear. They were forgotten by history because they didn't write it. But without them, there would be no Viking Age at all. Now, a dear listener, let your eyes grow heavy and your breath grow slow. You've walked the muddy paths, tilled the frozen earth, endured the hunger and the cold. Rest now under wool blankets and the crackling fire. You've survived another season. Sleep well and dream of a simpler world, where even the hardest lives had moments of warmth. Good night. Tonight, we drift back to the cold, unforgiving shores of Scandinavia, where the wind howled through wooden longhouses and the sea foamed with the oars of longships. But this is no tale of heroism or glory. No. Tonight we explore the darker corners of Viking history, the brutal world of Viking kings and warlords. Men who ruled not by law, but by fear. Men whose names were etched into history not with ink, but with blood. So, close your eyes, lie back, and let the chill of the North Sea wash over you. For our story begins, not in a grand hall, but on a battlefield soaked in mud. It was the year 845. The wind carried the scent of wet iron and smoke across the river scene. Frankish peasants huddled in fear, praying that the gods, or perhaps the saints, would protect them. But no prayers could stop what was coming. The longships had arrived, dozens of them, and standing at the prow of the lead ship was a man whose name would become a whisper of terror: Ragnar Lodbrok. Ragnar, the scourge of the Franks, wore not a crown but a cloak of wild furs and battle scars. He was no ordinary king. He was a warlord who believed in his own legend. His hair was braided in thick ropes, his beard stained with ash, and his eyes, it is said, held the madness of Odin himself. His fleet swept through Paris like fire through dry grass. Churches burned, bells fell silent, and gold flowed like wine into Viking hands. But Ragnar was not content with loot. He demanded fear. He wanted the people to remember his name long after the buildings were rebuilt. He took prisoners, clergy, nobles, even children, and released them only after his coffers were filled with silver. Some he didn't release. Some were used in dark rituals to please the gods, or so the rumors said. But Ragnar's story, like many Viking tales, ended not in triumph but in torment. Years later, captured by the Northumbrians in England, he was thrown into a pit of snakes. Legend says he laughed as he died, mocking his enemies until the very end. How the little pigs would grunt, he said, when they hear how the old boar suffered. But Ragnar was not alone in his cruelty. In fact, some say he was not the worst. Let us travel to Norway, to the frosted mountains and dark pine forests of the 10th century. There, in the black winter, rose a king whose name sends shivers down the spine of historian Zoe, Eirik Bloodaxe. Even as a child, Eirik was said to have killed his half-brothers, one by one, to secure the throne of Norway. They say he didn't weep. He didn't even blink. He simply took his axe and did what he believed a true king should do. When he finally wore the crown, the land grew quiet, not from peace, but from fear. His enemies disappeared. His people obeyed, not out of love, but because the forests were filled with unmarked graves. He ruled with cruelty and suspicion. Anyone who questioned his rule was accused of sorcery or treason, and dealt with in the same way. Slowly, publicly. But the thing about terror is that it's a lonely way to rule. Eventually, even his allies abandoned him. He fled to England, a king without a kingdom. He died as he lived, fighting for power he could not keep. Now, let us sail east, across the Baltic Sea to the land of the Rus, where Norsemen ruled Slavic lands and built kingdoms far from home. Here lived a warlord known as Sviatoslav Igorevich, a Viking prince born in Kiev. Sviatoslav was a warrior from the age of 5. He was never seen without his sword. He shaved his head except for a single long lock, worn in the fashion of a steppe horseman. He wore no fancy robes, no crown, only the scars of endless battle. He carved a path through the Balkans, the Khazars, the Alans, and the Bulgars. His campaigns were swift, brutal, and relentless. He slept on the ground with his men, ate raw meat, trusted no one, but his cruelty was legendary. When he captured a city, he offered only 2 choices: surrender or annihilation. He piled skulls at city gates as a warning. His enemies called him a demon, but his soldiers called him a god. He died as all warlords must, in an ambush, surrounded, betrayed. His skull, it is said, was fashioned into a drinking cup by his enemies. Back in Scandinavia, in the Danish lands, another terrible king arose. His name was Harald Bluetooth, and while history remembers him today for uniting Denmark and Norway, and for giving his name to modern wireless technology, his rise to power was anything but peaceful. Harald was a schemer, a usurper, and a ruthless consolidator. His own father, Gorm the Old, had ruled with traditional Viking values: war, honor, and sacrifice. But Harald was a new kind of Viking, a manipulator, a man who traded swords for sermons when it suited him. He converted to Christianity, not because he believed in the Christian God, but because it gave him legitimacy. But when his subjects resisted, he used force. Churches were built on the bones of those who wouldn't bow. Pagan shrines were burned. His own son, Sween Forkbeard, rebelled against him, calling his father a traitor to their gods. Father and son fought. Harald lost. He died in exile, betrayed by blood. And then there was Ivar the Boneless, the son of Ragnar Lodbrok. No one knows why he was called boneless. Some say it was because he had a disease that made his bones soft and fragile. Others say it was because he could twist and contort his body in battle like a serpent. Whatever the truth, Ivar was feared above all. He led the great heathen army into England in 865. He burned monasteries, slaughtered kings, and built a reign of terror that lasted for decades. He was not just a warrior, he was a tactician, a master of siege warfare. Cities that had withstood centuries fell under his hand. But it was his cruelty that made him a legend. When he captured the Northumbrian king Sixlola, the man who killed his father, Ivar executed him with the blood eagle, a ritual so grotesque, historians debate whether it was even possible. According to legend, the victim's ribs were split open from behind, the lungs pulled out like wings, and salt rubbed into the wounds, all while the man still breathed. Whether myth or truth, the name Ivar the Boneless became a course in English villages for generations. Wary traveler, our story could end here. But it does not, for the Viking Age produced more than just cruel kings. It produced nightmares given form. Warlords with no thrones, men like Olaf Tryggvason, a Christian convert who ruled Norway with fire and iron. He spread the new religion not with words, but with the sword. Those who resisted baptism were drowned or executed. Entire families burned in their homes. Pagan temples smashed, sacred groves chopped down. He believed he was saving souls. But the people remembered only the terror. He died in a sea battle, leaping into the water rather than face capture. His body was never found. Some say he became a ghost ship captain, haunting the fjords forever. Now the fire has dimmed. The longships rot on forgotten shores. The war cries have faded into silence, but their names remain: Ragnar, Eirik, Sviatoslav, Ivar, Olaf, terrible kings and warlords. Each a shadow of the age that made them. They ruled with blood and fire. They built kingdoms that crumbled. and they left behind only bones, ruins, and half-remembered tales whispered by candlelight.
You've come back, once again, to our quiet corner of time. Here history unfolds not with thunder, but with a whisper. Let your eyes soften. Let your breathing slow. Let the past rock you gently, like a longship swaying in the dark waves. Tonight we sail deep into the Viking Age. But not into the glory of feasts and discoveries, no. Tonight we explore the shadows, the darker corners, the terrible kings and warlords of the Viking world. Men whose names sent fear across seas, who ruled not with justice, but with steel and blood. Their reigns are long gone, but their stories still stir beneath the surface. So now let us begin. Our journey starts with a name that twisted itself into the heart of fear, a name half legend, half mystery. Ivar the Boneless. Some say he had no bones at all, his body soft and snake-like, slithering through battles with an uncanny grace. Others say his bones were too brittle for war, and so he ruled with his mind. Whatever the truth, his enemies feared him more than any Viking alive. He was a son of Ragnar Lothbrok, the great Viking who had once dared to attack Paris and plague the English coast. When Ragnar was captured and thrown into a pit of snakes by King Aella of Northumbria, his sons were scattered. But Ivar did not weep. He waited. And then he came not alone, but with the great heathen army. A vast force organized, patient, merciless. He landed in England and claimed vengeance with cold precision. Town after town fell. Fields were burned. Churches looted. When at last he captured Aella, the man who killed his father, Ivar did something no one forgot. They say he performed the blood eagle, a terrible form of execution. The victim's ribs cut open, lungs pulled out, spread like wings, while the heart still beat. It is hard to know if it was real, but even the rumor was enough to make men surrender without a fight. Ivar did not conquer blindly. He used trickery and negotiation. He took the city of York through deception, not